into my world. Won't you come on in?
Hej, mit navn det er Stig Ulriksen, og welcome to my world. I dag har jeg fået besøg af en af de bedste forfattere, som Elvis-verden overhovedet kan præstere. Jeg har faktisk også skrevet om Dolly Parton, for at det ikke skal være løgn. Men nu er det jo altså Elvis, vi skal snakke lidt om her i dag. For det er nemlig på grund af ham, at hun er havnet her i Randers, helt præcis på Memphis Mansion. Welcome, Alanna Nash.
Stig, thank you so much.
It's a big pleasure finally to meet you, because I have, as I told you shortly before we started the program, I have two authors I admire within the biography world, writing biographies about Dolly, Elvis, and so on. That's you, and that's Peter Graunik.
Well, that's huge praise. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I think you do a fantastic research also when you write, and that's something I really appreciate when I read a book. I just get details out that I didn't have before. One of my last books I've been reading is actually about the Colonel. That was the last one of all your books I've been reading, and it actually put a totally new perspective to the Colonel compared to what I thought I knew before. Mm-hmm. I thought I knew everything because I read another book about him years before that also. You met the Colonel. And can you tell the viewers a little bit about your first impression of him? You write about it in the book, but they don't know it.
I did have 3 meetings with the Colonel in his last years, all in Las Vegas. And I have to say he could be extremely charming if he wanted to be. And the times I was with him, especially that first time, he was almost holding court. I wanted to meet him, and I had heard he was going to be in the Hilton coffee shop at a certain time, and I went over there and waited until his booth was free. Just he was sitting there with his wife, and I went over and introduced myself, and eventually he invited me to sit down, and I was there for 3 hours, and he just told stories and kind of held court. Very charming.
And you also met him 2 times more, you said. Was that just as charming, or it was not so charming when he found out you wanted to make a book? Or?
Yes, well, the reason I went was because I was writing a book with Lamar Fike, Marty Lacker, and Billy Smith. And I thought, because a couple of those guys were very, very critical of the Colonel, that he should have his chance to respond to allegations and to the lawsuit that the state of Tennessee had forced the estate to bring against him in 1980. So I was hoping to get an interview with him. But that first day, when he was just in such a good mood and so charming, I didn't mention it. And I thought, I'll just go home and write him a letter and we'll go from there. But the next morning, he called me very bright and early and woke me up in my hotel room. And I was so puzzled because I hadn't told him where I was staying, and he hadn't asked me where I was staying. So I still don't know how he knew where I was, but he was calling to offer tickets to another production there at the Hilton. And I knew he never gave away anything, so I was very mystified as to why he was being so friendly. And at that time, I said, you know, I want to tell you that the reason I came to Las Vegas is that I'm doing this book with the 3 guys, and I was hoping you would contribute to it. And his tone really changed. He seemed very disappointed, and I had liked him so much. I was disappointed that he was disappointed. So I went home, and I mean, he was polite about it, but still, like, his voice dropped, and I just heard kind of disappointment in his voice. So I went home and I wrote him a letter, and I said I was hoping to give you a chance to go on the record about this and clear up any misconceptions. And he wrote back and he said, well, I don't need to do that, but if you're out in Las Vegas again, you let me know. So another chance came to come to Las Vegas, and I went. And again, this time we had lunch. And then he and his wife took me for a drive around Las Vegas. And this time I tried to ask him some questions about the quality of Elvis's movies that he'd chosen and some of the songs that that Elvis was forced to sing. And he got angry with me. He got angry, and he lost his temper with me a little bit.
Good he didn't drop you off the car, right?
Well, it was a little disconcerting. Yes, he was. I could tell he was very displeased with me. But again, I went home and wrote to him, and he said again, "If you're out here." So yet there was the third lunch, and I never was quite sure why he entertained my company. But when the book came out, I understand he was not very happy about it at all. This was the Memphis Mafia book. I hadn't written the biography of the Colonel yet. That didn't happen until he died. Because I used to look across the table at him. He was really quite good to me. and solicitous of my opinions about things, but always testing me. He would do that. He would joke with you, and he would test you. And I knew that I was under scrutiny of some kind, but I didn't know why. I'm not quite sure what he thought of me or why he wanted my company, but it was completely fascinating.
How the wind was woven in my soul. Don't you know how the wind was woven? Can't let loose, can't let go. Like the weave of a spider wound around my heart. I'm no longer free, endless. I'm where you want me. Don't you know that's where I wanna be? Spinning round like a blue fly, thoughts of you fill my head, and no matter how I try, I can sleep in my bed. I've been round time. Oh girl, what can I do all the time? How the weather's woven and how I fell in love with you. I've been round for the last time. Oh girl, what can I do? Ain't it time how the weather's woven and how I fell in love with you. Oh, that's how.
And the Elvis and the Mafia book, as it was called, it's also a very good book because you have to talk with three of the people who was actually closest. Billy, probably the closest one of all. That's what everybody say. What I like about the book is also that some of you have to put it in when they correct each other. You know, say, "Oh, I must not remember this correct." You know, and things like that.
That's right.
It makes you also realize that all the stories you hear, it's always that person's point of view of that story.
Right. It's almost like when a police officer goes to the scene of an accident and interviews three people, he comes away with three different viewpoints or stories of how something occurred, and that's what it was like with them. And I wanted to put each fellow's version of or recollections of a certain event in there, so the reader could make up his mind what was really the truth.
What idea did you have about the book? Was it planned to be like this from the beginning? Because what people don't know who have not read the book but read it, is that you put up a write a little bit in the beginning of the chapter, and then you let the three guys talk about this category we are talking about here. Was that decided from beginning, or was it when you were sitting and putting all the things together, thinking, maybe it would be better to put up that way? Or?
Well, they came to me to write this book, and originally there was to be a fourth, Alan Fortas, whose little autobiography I had ghostwritten originally, but then Alan died. But I had three very strong personalities to weave through this story, and again, since they didn't always agree, I thought, what is the best way to handle this material for the most impact? And I had read a book in which an author had handled material like this in an oral history way, where I just let them talk. So Lamar will talk, Billy will talk, Marty will talk. And unless there's need for me to get involved, the author to get involved on the page to give some context, I didn't. I just let them tell the story. But of course that meant the book was going to be enormously long because they all had lots to say. And it was very long, and really I was quite lucky that the publisher let me get away with the length that we did. But you know, between them, really at least one of them was there at all times of Elvis's life, except for the very, very early years, because in Billy's case, the Smith family and the Presley family moved together from Tupelo in Billy's father's car. So we almost literally had Elvis from cradle to grave, pretty close. But we needed to have some kind of oral history form because I wanted to preserve the way they spoke also. Lamar had a very distinctive, almost intellectual, but hilariously way of expressing himself. And Marty was pretty straight on with a kind of a thread of anger through many of his recollections or irony. And Billy was just, you know, he talks in a sort of a country way and in sort of charming expressions. And I wanted to preserve those personalities. And I thought the oral history way was the only way to do that, really.
And to come back to the Colonel, they didn't have that much good things to say about the Colonel, some of the guys, especially because he want them out of the way and other things that didn't work out for them, and they saw Joe Esposito as being the Colonel's little poodle, if you can use that expression. Were they satisfied with the book when they read it, I guess, after it came out?
The three guys?
Three guys.
They were very happy with the book. Yes, they were very happy. And you know, they were eager to tell their story because a lot of people thought they should have been able to save Elvis. Well, there was no saving Elvis. I mean, Elvis was Elvis, and any attempt anybody made to curtail his drug abuse, they either got bounced out, as in the case of Red and Sonny and Dave Hebler, or in the case of Billy and Dr. Nick, who tried to water down the drugs. Well, he knew what was going on, so he'd just get on a plane and go to Las Vegas or go to LA and find some other doctor who'd give him what he wanted. So they knew that the inevitable was going to happen, and Lamar was walking around in the months of the last summer saying he'll never see the snowfly. You can just tell when somebody is dying, inches by inches in front of you. And they were helpless. So they sort of had gotten, even Lisa Marie was angry that you know, they hadn't been able to save him, and they felt a little guilty they hadn't been able to save him. But they were eager to tell their stories, and they had been through a lot. I mean, life with Elvis was not all fun and games. It was very, very difficult at times, and I think they needed to tell those stories, and I think that the history needed to be told of Elvis's struggle as well. So I hope we did sort of a good service to Elvis's service, to his memory, and to the history of really the greatest entertainer the world has ever seen, but who was just at heart a regular guy in some ways.
Who had some problems.
Who had some problems, yes.
I can say that it really opened my eyes up for who Elvis was. I thought I knew everything about Elvis, you know, before I read that, but I found so many other things and other sides of him because he was a complex human. Yeah,
a very complex human. You know, he of course had been a twin whose twin was stillborn. His parents, at least his father, had made him feel as if he were living for two, which would alter your psyche. It would make you think you were special indeed, but you had a responsibility in a way. And with that kind of talent and those looks and that kind of skyrocketing fame that really no one but Frank Sinatra before him had, and he eclipsed Frank Sinatra even. There was no blueprint for how to live your life or conduct your career with that kind of overwhelming fame. So it's, I'm glad he had as much fun as he did, really, but there was no one to kind of help him manage the after effects of that fame.
You're an Elvis fan yourself?
I am.
Yeah. So that maybe helped on the interest because you've been writing 3 books about Elvis and co-writing together with Alan Fortas.
Yes.
It must take a lot of research. Here I think about the book about Elvis and all his women you made, you know.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find all these women to tell their story about Elvis?
Well, after I did the Memphis Mafia book, which is a very male look at Elvis, because it's the men who were literally with him 24 hours a day, I began to think about what it was like for the women who were around Elvis. And I was getting more and more viewpoint that he was a very different guy around women than he was around men. And as I began to find women who knew him in various ways, either they were platonic friends, or they were girlfriends, or they were people who had helped him with his career in one way or another, I began to discover how woman-centered he was, particularly since he was so close to his mother. But he really enjoyed the company of women, and not just his girlfriends. He wanted to hear their opinion. He liked the way women thought. He wanted to be even young fans. He enjoyed their company. He liked to babysit children when he was little. He was young at heart, but always he had this soft side, this feminine side, to balance out that very hard masculinity that he had. In that way, he was very balanced in his personality. But I hadn't really realized until I wrote Baby Let's Play House that women had influenced his stage act to the degree that they did, and even some of the songs that he recorded, and that women were on his mind at all times, and again, not just as lovers or girlfriends, but I found them through various ways. Joe Esposito helped me find some of the women that I could not find on my own. And some of them I had interviewed earlier for other Elvis projects. And then in the case of, say, Barbara Hearn, the very charming 1956 girlfriend, she knew other people that I had not heard of and passed along their information. So I was really surprised how much people wanted to help on that, because this was a part of him that hadn't been explored before, how woman-centered that he was.
Same for me, actually, because I read the book Elvis and the Memphis Mafia before I read Baby Let's Play House. And it was also surprisingly for me, as you say now, that guys talk, and he was like this to the guys, oh, I'm going up and do something with her, But actually, sex was not that important.
That's
for
right.
Elvis,
That's
it was
right.
more like having the talk and the baby talk and nursing a little bit, kissing a little bit. That was so much more important for him to be intimate that way.
You're exactly right. Sex was not really what was on his mind most of the time. Intimacy was on his mind. Baby talk, closeness, maybe lying together and holding each other, but in an intimate, affectionate way, as opposed to a sexual way. But always, I think he was trying to replicate the closeness that he'd had with his mother when he was a very small child, perhaps when his father was away in prison, and it was just the two of them against the world, really.
That's another subject that all these women say, actually, all of them saying that what he enjoyed most was actually to talk about his mother, It was a conversation that he brought up for almost every girl that he was together with.
Yes, he talked about his mother a lot, and he liked women who looked somewhat like his mother, or in the case of Priscilla and some of the others, he really actually wanted them to resemble his mother, and even Ginger Alden he was attracted to, his very last girlfriend, because he thought she looked like a young Gladys, and when I heard that I thought, oh, there's no way, and then in the book you're able to fold back the pages to a very young Gladys and Ginger Alden, and you go, oh my gosh, I see exactly what he meant. Yes.
It's amazing, and that's the eye-opener. That's one of the reasons I also love your books so much.
Thank you.
Alanna, do you have any other books in mind now? You probably have done all you need to do in the Elvis world, even though you have so much leftovers from Elvis and the Memphis Mafia. Is there any new Elvis books on the way, or is it another subject you are thinking of now?
I had thought about doing a book with the sons of Gordon Stoker of the Jordanaires. I think they're not ready to move forward on that. But various people have come to me with smaller projects than the larger books that I've done. But I probably have said all I have to say about it, really. But you never know. There's always, just when I think I'm finished with Elvis books, they sneak up on me. I'm of the opinion that books choose you rather than you choose them. You just have to be patient and see if they show up.
And it's also taking a lot of time. How long time did you spend on each of these books? Of course, it has been different from book to book, but you must have spent so much time just doing the research, and then afterwards writing and picking out which things to be in the book.
The Colonel book took about 6 years of the research and writing. That was a very hard book to do because the Colonel left no trail, no legal trail really, to speak of. And his origins in Holland were a bit of a mystery, and why he came to America when he did was a bit of a mystery, and other unsolved stories in his biography. The book with the Memphis Mafia took about 5 years for various reasons. Just interviewing them took a long time. I interviewed them each separately multiple times. I interviewed them once together in kind of a marathon session where they all just kind of, I would ask one question and then they would all take off and feed off each other. I couldn't even get in there to ask another follow-up question. It was like trying to catch a runaway train. And then I interviewed Billy and Joe, husband and wife, together. And then many follow-up phone calls with Marty or Billy or Lamar to make sure I got something right. And so that book took a long time.
When you make a book, of course it's America, you can sell so much more copies and it can go all over the world and things like that. But I sometimes think, is a book really giving 6 years of payment for salary and things like that? You also work as a journalist in America. Well,
I never really make very much money on my books. They take, because they're nonfiction and they're all research based, whatever advance I might get from the publisher is immediately eaten up in travel or transcription of the interviews, or your agent gets a certain percentage and Uncle Sam gets his cut. So I never really make any money on them, but they're real labors of love, and I hope that they have contributed to the understanding of Elvis. I always say that you can't understand the art until you understand the artist, and I hope that the books have contributed to a larger understanding of him as a whole.
Nothing quite as pretty as Mary in the morning, chasing the rainbow through the dreams far away. And when she climbed over stacks, soft as the falling, looked at the rainbow shining on her golden hair. When I awake and see her there close beside me, I want to take her in my arms. The ache is there, it's so deep inside me. Nothing quite as pretty as Mary in the morning, chasing a rainbow in the dreams far away. And when she turns and touches me, I kiss her fingers softly, and then my Mary waits to love another day. And Mary's there in stormy days and stormy weather. She doesn't care the right or wrong, the love we share together. Quite as pretty as Mary in the morning, chasing the soft light, the starlight in her hair. And as we walk, I hold her close beside me. All our tomorrows for lifetime we'll share.
That brings me to a question. Did it bring in a new point of view of Elvis? In your case, interviewing those guys, did you have another way of looking at Elvis after you had all these interviews and you wrote your book? And the same regarding the Colonel, and we can take Dolly also, actually.
When I wrote my book about Dolly Parton, she was really quite young. I think she was 32, and just beginning to branch out from pure country to pop, and to establish herself as a larger star, also in the movies. And you know, Nashville wasn't sure they wanted to see her do that, and there was a lot of kind of backbiting about that. So it was a controversial time in her life, and I figured she would become a huge star. I don't know that I would have foreseen that she would become really a true American icon, but I'm really glad I did that book. I later discovered that we were distantly related, something that she thought the first time we met, so that was a lovely surprise. But she's certainly gone on to establish herself as one of the premier songwriters of the American Songbook, so I'm honored that she let me do that book. With the case of the Memphis Mafia, I think that book was very controversial at the time that it came out. A lot of the fans were not prepared for the revelations that the guys made, and we really got a lot of criticism from fans. But through the years, that book has been validated in lots of ways. You mentioned Peter Guralnick. Mr. Guralnick used a lot of material from it, credited it, of course. I'm not saying he stole it or anything, but he had done his own research and found that it dovetailed precisely with what my guys said. And so with his kind of stamp of approval on that, I think that the fans had a larger picture of the veracity with which our guys had told their stories. With the Colonel, he continues to be a mystery, but a never-ending source of fascination for me. And there is a Colonel film in the works based on that book. I'm very happy about that. I'm co-writing that, and I continue to research him, and am open to more and more research on him. He's fascinating. With Baby Let's Play House, I think the revelation for me was that I had new respect for Priscilla when I researched that book. She went through a lot. You know, Elvis was going to be Elvis, and he wanted his family. He was very proud of his wife and his child, but he wanted to be able to play as well, and it took an awful lot of patience and self-respect and digging in, I think, for Priscilla to stay in there as long as she did. So I earned a new respect for her while researching that book.
Fantastic. And regarding the Colonel, he spent over 8 years trying to become a mystery, so of course it takes some time to find out all the
That's
things.
right.
But you really did a fantastic work on that book, and I look so much forward to see the movie when it comes out.
Thank you.
And I know the movie can never get as close as your book can. That's the reason why I always say to people, read the book. It's the best thing. You get really into people when you read biographies that way.
Thank you so much, Leif.
It's a good time.
Really enjoyed this visit.
Thank you, Alanna, for coming by.
Thank you so much.
Og dermed er jeg nået frem til vejs ende af Welcome to my world i denne her uge. Jeg håber at se jer alle sammen tilbage igen i næste uge. Tak fordi I kiggede med.
Welcome to my world. Won't you come on in?